Yeah, from the beginning, I always had the assumption that I would just buy it and sell it for higher one day. And that was kind of the first thought that I had when I was doing this. I was like 0.1 and I'll sell it one day for an ETH. It's not as much like that anymore, but I still do believe that one day that could come back. Also, I'm now way more interested in being a part of those communities, like I said, and being connected to those people who are interested in the same things as me, and hopefully I can make some money off it too as a plus.
Yeah, I do not wear my heart on my sleeve. I cannot let them see in too deep, cause I know they can use it against me. Only one I can trust is me. I got niggas I keep around me.
Episode 24 of Invest in Music with Michael DiVestea. Today we're here to talk about his internship here in LA and him being a core contributor to Invest in Music. He talks about collecting music in college and how he was getting onboarded to ecosystems like Sound. As a reminder, you can collect this episode on investinmusic.xyz. It's the best way to support our guests, so without further ado, let's get into it. Episode 24 with Michael DiVestea. We are back, Invest in Music. We got Michael DiVestea, college dropout, now out here in LA, core contributor, Invest in Music. Michael, how are you feeling today, man?
Good. I'm excited to be here.
We'll clarify that he did not, in fact, drop out of college. Instead, he's just spending a semester out here, really immersing himself in the Onchain music world. So we wanted to give him a platform to spread his wisdom as the rising talent in Onchain music. Michael, why don't you give us a quick background on yourself?
Yeah, so I got into Onchain music back at the beginning of college when I was turning 18. Basically, I got into crypto. I found sound.xyz, and I collected my first track during one of my classes. I was like, got addicted to it, kept collecting, and made my way to an experience with Daniel Allen and David Greenstein, who came to my school, and they talked about all the things that were going on with music NFTs on Sound and stuff like that. And I connected with Daniel afterwards, and now I'm here in LA.
It's a great story. I want to unpack it a bit because there's a lot of layers here. Just to kind of highlight that, we're talking about Michael collecting a song on Sound during class at Syracuse, which is extremely interesting to say the least. But I want to go back even sooner than that. Talk to me about your roots as sort of a fan of music, what your relationship with it is, and then how you even got yourself in a position to be collecting on music and sound in the first place.
Yeah, so I have been playing piano since I was in kindergarten. So I had that musical background for a long time, and I was always interested in making my own songs and doing all that, but I wasn't that good at producing, so I decided to go down the business route. And so I did a summer program at NYU and really just learned about all the things that were going on in the music business and decided that that was what I was going to do when I went to school.
And how has that school experience been for you? Was this something that you knew very adamantly you wanted to work in music, but you didn't really know how? Was there a direction that you were trying to follow? Or talk to me about your college experience in the music industry.
Yeah, when I came into school, I didn't really know what I was going to be interested in. I had no idea that there was anything related to Web3 music at that point. So I was just kind of going to the classes, like trying to learn as much as I could. And as soon as I found Sound, I was like, this is a really cool experience to talk to the artists that I like their music and collect the NFTs. And there's like a whole business model around it. And I like that it also helped artists. So
how'd you even hear about Sound in the first place?
I don't actually remember. I think I was just looking at different crypto platforms. Like I originally found Audius, which was not NFTs. It was more of like music streaming. I was very interested in that. And I guess somehow along the way, I found Sound and I collected my first drop. It was back when everything was 0.1 ETH. Mm-hmm. So I think it was like with the gas fee, it was like almost $400 for my first NFT. And I don't know, I just had the money and I went for it.
The glory days. And I think it's important to set the stage here because obviously early days of Sound, it was kind of like right when NFTs were popping as a whole, there was a lot going on. Did you find yourself having an interest in the crypto market more broadly first and then landing on things like Audius and Sound after the fact? Or what did your relationship look like with crypto as a whole?
Yeah, I always knew that when I turned 18, I wanted to like make a Coinbase account and look at Bitcoin. And at that time, I didn't know anything more than that. I just knew Bitcoin because that was the main thing in the news and whatever. And so then I found Ethereum. I was looking at NFTs and I found Audius coin also, which was I was like back on Clubhouse. They used to do like spaces on Clubhouse, and I was like listening to their town halls, whatever, and trying to like trade tokens and whatever. And then eventually it made its way to NFTs.
And was this something that was happening within your friend group? Or when you say that you heard about Bitcoin on the news, you wanted to trade it when you were 18, was this an interest that you had individually, or were your friends also talking about this as well?
It was pretty much just me. Like, I had one friend who had shown me Coinbase, and that was kind of how I knew what it was. But at that time, it was just me like going in and exploring. Like, none of my friends knew anything about what a MetaMask was or really anything about crypto. So I was just kind of navigating it on my own, and luckily the sound community was very welcoming, and I found a bunch of, people online that I could talk to about the music that I like. So I was very excited about it.
It's definitely very reminiscent of my experience getting into crypto as a whole. I remember I was at school at University of Boulder. My friend Cooper Kiernan, shout out, was one of the first people who told me about crypto. But at that point, it was basically just like buy some Bitcoin, same thing that you were talking about. But when I started to really go down that rabbit hole and go to meetups and try and immerse myself more in the culture, it did feel like you were kind of breaking off of like what your friends were doing, because it was just like a weird thing to say that you were into this new like crypto space. But I don't know, I just kind of had this inclination that it was a space worth paying attention to. And I really made an entire new friend group on the back of my interest in crypto that was like distinctly different from how I was spending my time with just my college friends more broadly.
Yeah, I lived near the New York City area. So I remember like summer of 2021, I think it was, I went to NFT NYC, and I was like looking online at like what events I could find that were like music related, and tried to get in and just meet as many people as I could who were interested in that topic, because a lot of the kids my age weren't on it yet. So.
And are still not on it for the most part.
For sure. Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing that I want to highlight in this conversation is, Michael's out here doing an internship, learning about Onchain music. And I think the biggest thing I want to zoom in on here is just like having an open conversation about, how your peers are viewing this space. Because to put some color around this, when I was in college, SoundCloud was a very established platform. Like, it was something that all of my friends in music were doing, and me going into the crypto world was very distinctly different. But I remember at the time when I was a freshman or a sophomore in college, everyone was on SoundCloud. There was a lot of artists on SoundCloud. There was a lot of new music. There were artists playing shows and whatnot. And we're in this very interesting spot with Onchain music where, even though sound is exciting to people like you and me, I would say within the mainstream music public, most people don't even know that it exists or that there's even anything to pay attention to. So I'm kind of curious to hear, like, when it came to you having someone like Daniel or David come and speak at your university, did you know what sound was at that time and who Daniel was prior to them coming for that conversation?
Yeah, I was actually the reason that they came. I told my professor about it because I knew that a lot of the students should be hearing about this like emerging space, because it definitely wasn't on a lot of the kids' radars. So I recommended that they came to visit, and it took like almost a full year before they could visit. And when they did, we got to teach a lot of the kids about NFTs and the different ways that artists can succeed with them instead of just putting their music just on DSPs and all that kind of stuff. So it definitely, some of the kids were interested, but there's still a long ways to go, I think.
What was the general sentiment during that conversation?
Well, I remember one of the kids like raised their hand and said, "Why would you pay $100 for this track?" And
such a good question.
Sometimes it's
what did David or Daniel say?
I think David went on to he has this little speech that he did for a while about social clout, and basically that's one of the main drivers of music NFTs at that time, especially like basically being able to show what kind of music you like and showing that you were there. Back then it was like 25, 50, maybe like 100 editions on those drops. So like you were part of a limited group that made it worth it to like spend the money and be a part of that collector chat or just connect with that artist in general.
Do you think that the person who asked the question bought it, or do you think that it just went completely over their head? Or to say it a different way, do you think that there actually was any acknowledgement that there could be social clout associated with buying a song for $100?
I think it's hard for a lot of the kids to get over that like monetary aspect of it. I definitely think that there is that social part of music. Of course, like people, like especially in my program, they wanted to share what music they like, and they're proud of that. But the spending money on it was just a hard thing, I think, still for people to wrap their head around. And maybe if, they came back to class today and now tracks can be like as little as $1 on Optimism, I think maybe that might change in their head. I
want to spend the second half of this conversation talking about the space and where we're currently at. But before we go there, something that I know is that when you had that conversation with David and Daniel, you probably had maybe like 25 to 50 songs in your collection at that point?
Yeah, at a much higher price per NFT.
Yeah, and I remember at that point in time, you started to pop up on my radar because you were always somehow figuring out how to get the first edition of all these songs. I'm not going to put you on the spot here, but would you be willing to share your strategy of how you were sniping these songs at that point in time? I feel like you can share it because it doesn't really happen that much anymore.
It's not as much of a thing anymore. Like with open editions, it's like now it's more based on who's the biggest collector. But I would go in I would basically open my MetaMask wallet. I'd refresh the page a million times, and I'd wait 2 seconds before the public sale, refresh, wait for that collect button, and just spam it, get through. And a lot of the times it ended up being top 3 of the earliest collectors, which I was very excited about.
But what I find very interesting about your collecting experience is that you were doing this all on mobile. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that was how I really got interested in a lot of these things, because I do everything on my phone, especially when I was getting into it, looking at the Coinbase app on my phone, stuff like that. So I got into it through the mobile aspect of it. And also a little tip is that when you do it on desktop, the MetaMask extension has to load a little bit faster than if you're using the MetaMask browser on mobile. So yeah.
I feel like even just that early use of mobile apps to be collecting was so interesting, because it was kind of the first time that I started to see there being an advantage to using your phone. My experience with crypto has always been on desktop. I don't use my phone to do anything in crypto because I find all the apps to suck, all the wallets to suck. But you kind of found a way to make it advantageous. And I thought that was very interesting because, now with the emergence of things like friend tech, et cetera, we're obviously seeing the mobile space starting to become more popular. And it feels like you as a college kid collecting music on sound, that to me was one of the earliest inclinations of you actually having an advantage for doing something on your phone.
Yeah, and I feel like if there wasn't that Apple 30% fee, there would be a lot more activity on mobile, especially I still go on the OpenSea app. You can't trade, but I go on there and I look at certain collections. I'll go on the Sound app all the time to listen to music now that they have that app, but you can't collect. So I feel like that's definitely going to be, if that does one day become a way to collect, it'll definitely be a driver for kids.
Totally. And now let's transition from you sniping songs on your phone in the back of class to kind of where we're at today. So it seems like after that conversation with David and Daniel, you doubled down more on the space, you were collecting a lot more, etc. How did you start to cement yourself more in the space beyond just being a collector that was just buying songs on sound to being someone that was actively being involved in these conversations and now contributing to platforms like Invest in Music?
I first started by joining all the collectors chats. I would have any NFT that I got, if it had a guild association with it, I'd go to guild, I'd get into that Telegram chat, and I would just meet as many people as I could. I'd Twitter DM some people, other collectors, and chat with them. And I remember I bought one song by Roki on the secondary market, and that's how I connected to you, because you DM'd me to join the Roki chat, which was being opened up at that time. And so just those small collecting things were giving me opportunities to really find a way for a job or anything to participate in the space more.
One thing that I find interesting about you is that you're really active in those chats where you tell me things that happen in them that I might not even catch. Have you found yourself to have gotten real value out of being in those collector chats? Or help me understand from the perspective of someone who's new to the space looking to learn information, what has it been beneficial to you to be in those collector chats? How has that actually materialized for you?
I think a lot of the chats that have been most helpful to me are those where if it's an artist chat, the artist is mostly active in there, because there's really that community around it and people want to stay and come back, and they want to know what's coming with the next project, or there might be an exclusive opportunity to take advantage of. For example, in our own Invest in Music chat, we used to do like pre-sale access for the Now Pass and things like that. So just following along those chats, and even the non-music, like artist chats, there's like the Loners chat, which is like more of a collective. So there's multiple artists all within there. You can hear all the announcements from artists that are dropping who have been on Loners. You can see what other collectors are doing. So between all those different chats, I've just been watching and taking in as much information as possible.
And what's your mentality around like buying and selling songs? Because I know for someone in your position in college, obviously putting 0.1 ETH into a song is a very serious decision. Like, how do you think about trading songs, and what's some of your experience been with that?
Yeah, from the beginning, I always had the assumption that I would just buy it and sell it for higher one day. And that was kind of the first thought that I had when I was doing this. I was like, 0.1 and I'll sell it one day for an ETH. And it's not as much like that anymore, but I still do believe that one day that could come back. But also, I'm now way more interested in being a part of those communities, like I said, and being connected to those people who are interested in the same things as me, and basically, hopefully, I can make some money off it too as a plus. So.
Has it been pretty easy for you to follow along with things like Optimism coming out, going over to Layer 2, et cetera? Because what I find interesting about your experience is that most people who are really active collectors have had a long relationship with crypto prior. They've been on chain for 3, 4, 5 years. They've used DeFi platforms in the past. It almost feels like your entire relationship with being on chain started from using platforms like Sound. And I'm curious to hear, like, was it easy for you to follow along with things like bridging over to Optimism, collecting on a Layer 2, et cetera? Or what was that kind of whole world like for you to learn?
I'm much more comfortable with it now to do these like decentralized applications. But like when I was first getting into it, I'd basically just send Coinbase money to, I'd get ETH on Coinbase and I'd send it to MetaMask. And that was all you really needed to do, which was still pretty complicated. But now there's like bridging to Optimism and doing all these other things. I feel like Sound really helped like with their interface on making it easy to understand, because even today you can buy with mainnet ETH an Optimism drop really easily. You can do it with a credit card now. So I think I haven't done that many too complicated things like bridging. I've done like that's like probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. So I haven't gone that deep into it, but I'm always learning with these platforms.
Yeah, it's really interesting that it requires such a dedication to the collective sum of the whole to be able to keep up with what's happening, you know? Like even something like bridging ETH over to Optimism to collect. On the surface, you have a song that's being minted for $3 that costs less than 10 cents in gas, which objectively is phenomenal. You know, like I think it's a huge step in the right direction. But if you were not so committed to being a collector on chain, and we go into the shoes of any of your colleagues that are in your classes in college, I don't think anyone would be willing to take the time or effort to like learn how to do those things. And I'm curious to hear, kind of in line with my earlier line of questioning around like, were any of your peers doing this? Did you just find yourself getting more and more like away from like what your peers were doing in classes? You went deeper down this on-chain music rabbit hole, or were there anyone else in your vicinity that started to like follow along with you and also became collectors too?
I've definitely had some of my friends collect a drop every so often, you know, to support me in some of the things that I do on chain. But I think that if I wanted to tell someone about it now, it would be much easier for them to set up an account. I usually, if I'm telling them, I'd tell them to get a MetaMask and to just like put some ETH in it. And that's the easiest way to like start navigating how to interact with Web3.
Yeah, but pause there for a second. I think that that's the challenge of the space today, is that is 100% the correct way to explain to someone to get started today. But getting a MetaMask and putting ETH in it is extremely complicated, you know? And I think that one of the biggest challenges with the space is that if you want to get started, you need to write down 16 words. You need to make a Coinbase account. You need to know how to buy ETH with the credit card. And then you need to send that ETH from Coinbase to 0xA5666. And I guess the biggest question I've been wondering is like, what does that next chapter look like where people are able to participate on chain without needing to go as far down the rabbit hole of what I just described, but without them completely abstracting it away? Because I think on the other side of the puzzle, you have sign up with an email and a credit card, which is on Sound today. But I would go so far as to say that most people aren't really interested in that, because in the absence of you acknowledging that you're a part of the on-chain culture, there's still not a strong enough pool for you to want to go and buy these things on a credit card in the first place.
I think one of the things that's really like helpful is that, like, with your MetaMask, for example, like, it's all one account. You don't have to have multiple passwords and things like that. So I think that initial setup process, if it was easier, that would make all the difference, because I think the beauty of it is you can go onto any website and click Connect Wallet once you know what you're doing and start interacting right away.
Yeah.
And you don't need to set up a profile all the time.
And so let's zoom forward a little bit more. So you're collecting on chain, you're learning about things like bridging to optimism, et cetera. It feels like around this time is when you started to start contributing more to projects in the space. So I know that you have a relationship with Daniel and with Family Affair. Obviously, you're doing some work with Invest in Music. I'd love for you to talk more about your relationship with the space in general beyond you collecting, and specifically how you're adding value to these different projects.
Yeah, right now I'm doing a lot of the writing for all the Invest in Music stuff. It's been very helpful for me to go in and listen to all the new tracks that are coming out on Sound. And sometimes I'll look at other platforms too, like Catalog or Super Collector, to just kind of see what's going on in the space. And we highlight that on Music Monday all the time. Definitely always learning the artist handles, because I have to write the tweets. It's interesting to see all the different artists. Like, some artists have like 10 followers on Twitter, and some have like hundreds of thousands of followers, and they're all different results that are coming out of these NFT collections. And it just is basically how the artist leverages the space. So that's one of the things that I do a lot now. I'm also always looking for stories for our weekly recap. So I'm always on Twitter for that. I'm doing other ways of finding stuff like those chats and things like that, exploring all the new projects. Besides that, I'm also doing some work with an artist called Bear and Friends, who it's like my first like management client by myself, basically. And I saw that they were dropping music on ETH and it wasn't gaining really any traction. So I, DM'd them on Instagram. I set them up with Optimism drops, and hopefully it ends up being a successful run there.
I find it so interesting that management of on-chain music is telling your client to not mint on mainnet and to mint on Optimism as well. Like, it's hilarious because objectively it's such a meme that that's like what the conversation is, but that is what the conversation is. Like when it comes to like finding more collectors, it's actually not as much about like, you trying to reach their fans on Instagram today, at least. And I think that's something to have a conversation about. It's more like, here are the norms and practices that are working for the collector base that exists today. And if you put yourself in the right position, you're increasing your likelihood of getting mints by a drastic portion.
Yeah, 100%. I saw 80% of the drops on Sound now since they opened up or implemented Optimism, I think, have been on the Optimism network. So it's definitely been helping a lot of artists, especially at these lower price points. And it makes it easy for me to collect them too. Yeah,
if you can figure out how to get your ETH on there. And I would say that the other thing I want to cover here is that you mentioned you set up this conversation with David and Daniel at Syracuse about close to a year ago at this point, I would say.
Yeah, November of 2022, I think it was. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I know that there's a relationship with Daniel, obviously a big reason why you moved out here to LA to do this internship. Would love for you to kind of highlight more of the relationship you developed with him.
Yeah, I'm basically going to help him build out Family Affair, which is supposed to be a place for artists to learn about Web3 and also a bit about the Web2 part of things. He wants to help artists just in general with this platform there and using the knowledge that he's gained over time. So I'm definitely interested in, throughout this whole internship, like helping him build up the socials, helping find new artists to sign, and hopefully we can help some artists, make some extra money.
Yeah. And how do you think you do that? Because there's not one good question for this, and not one good answer, I should say, but everything you just highlighted, I think, is exactly accurate of where the space is as a whole right now. What's your intuition on how you go about developing a brand like Family Affair on chain, and what are some of the tactics or the strategies you're thinking of applying there?
I think definitely just communicating with the collectors for sure is like one of the biggest things right now, because that's the biggest value that you could provide right now. Like, there isn't that promise of flipping it for 10 times as much as you paid for it. So being that interconnection and making sure that you're just providing music that people want to keep listening to, I think that's basically all we can do at this point to make sure that we're positioned for a lot of collectors and other people to join in.
Yeah. It's really funny that the answer is really just talking to people. I mean, at the end of the day, we had West Coast on last week and he basically said the same thing, which was like in his Discord, he just talks to people, you know, and it's kind of crazy that it feels so obvious that if you're an artist that's dropping on chain that you should be talking to your collectors. And it's something that me and you were texting about last night is like, if these larger artists actually spent, you know, an ounce of their time in these collector chats, it would create so much value for the holders, because you have artists that are dropping that have millions of monthlies of listeners. But if you can get in a chat that has 5, 10, 15 collectors in it and you can have a meaningful conversation with them, it feels like that alone is enough value to justify you spending a couple dollars on a collection. And I'm curious to hear how you think about that and what you would encourage to artists that you're covering or collecting and what you hope to see out of them as a collector.
Yeah, I definitely think that when an artist interacts with the collector's chat or gives back to the community by doing a buyback of the NFTs or basically doing anything to acknowledge that you're there is basically a great way to, you know, grow trust in that community. And I think that, you know, people will pay like all this money to, like, when they go to a concert, like meet and greets, like basically on-chain music gives you a way to do that in a unique environment where you can find those like people who really care about the music online and connect with them at any time and anywhere. So
I think that's what's really important to highlight about these collector chats is I think there's an assumption right now that everyone who's buying music on chain is someone who wants to buy it and sell it for a profit. But what I don't think we talk about enough is that most of the people who are going through the hurdles of finding that guild link and getting into the chat, they're generally real fans. You know what I mean? Like, this is generally not people who are coming in looking for an airdrop, looking for a quick 100x. Like, if they're going through the steps of finding that guild link, buying a song on Sound, connecting your wallet and hopping into that Telegram chat, it's pretty much real fans in there. And granted, there's not a lot of them across the board, but I think it's really important to highlight because I think sometimes on-chain music can get a bad rep that all of the buyers are just like speculators who want to flip this music. But what I've seen in my experience is that at least over the course of the past few months, most of the people who are in these collector chats are real fans. And I think it is worth spending time to engage with them because they are there for the music and they're not necessarily just there to make money.
Yeah. And again, it's a great way for those collectors to see who's really likes the same things as them, and you can find really close friends just through that. So it's beneficial not only for the artist to be there, but just for everyone to interact with each other in those chats. So yeah, that's what I'm excited about.
And then I know another part of your continuous progress within the on-chain music ecosystem is obviously you're doing a lot of curation. You mentioned that you're helping to manage an artist named Bear Bear. You've also been responsible for helping some artists get on Sound and do some of their early drops. How was that for you, going from being like a collector to helping an artist get onboarded, helping them launch a drop? Like, what goes through your mind when you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely just want to help them to understand what they're about to get into. Like, what is the Sound community and how can you connect with them and make sure that you're doing the right thing. A lot of people right now like are just uploading a track and leaving it. And I think that going that little extra mile and maybe DMing some people who have collected similar artists or just reaching out to other people who may be in a similar position can really help you to be successful in the space. And that's what I recommend a lot of the time for these new artists.
What do you think it takes people of your age group to get excited about collecting music on chain?
I wish I knew, because then I could convince all my friends. But I mean, I think that there just has to be like really good songs that they want to like go onto the Sound app and listen in their car. Like, personally, like I drive with the Sound app playing sometimes instead of Apple Music. Like, I'll just fully listen on there or Spinamp and just listen to the NFTs I collected or just NFTs that I wish I collected when they were still selling. And I think that as more music comes in, like, everyone will be able to find their type of music that they like. So hopefully that will work out.
I think that the easy answer is to say that like when better music comes on sound, it's going to click for a lot more people. I think the biggest thing that I struggle with is all the great music in the world currently already exists on other platforms. And unless that music is exclusive to sound, there's not a strong reason for why you would consume it on there in the first place. And I think it's unrealistic for artists to only be releasing their music on chain, although I've been a proponent of saying that there's a lot of value to be had from only dropping music on chain. I think that the biggest question I have is like, what makes someone want to go and collect a song that they can go and listen to on Spotify, knowing that it costs money to collect and knowing that you can just stream it for free on Spotify? And like, I don't have an answer for it, but I think it's worth having an open conversation about. Like, what is your initial reaction to that question?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, I think that the whole aspect of on sound, like the golden egg and also the audience section were the two main drivers of like me being interested in a specific drop. Like I would like the music and then I'd go in and see like what is my potential to like if I got an old golden egg, or what, like if I could get the first position on this sound, like how many spots are there in the audience? Like if I'm the top of 100 people, that's at least 100 people are going to see you there and they can read your comment, or they can see that you were there and click on your profile and see what else you've collected. So I think just building on that profile aspect of it, like showing off what you have in your collection, is what makes it so special compared to Spotify, or any real platform like Apple Music or Spotify. Like the social aspects aren't built in as much there.
It's interesting because there's never been a good social experience around music. I would say the closest analogy I could have, and I wasn't even on MySpace, but apparently like on MySpace, there was a very social aspect around pinning your songs to your profile. Facebook groups, I think back in the day, were like a really good example of a social experiment around music. And I think the biggest question I've been asking lately is, if we exist in this world, which is how it is today, where you're not going to be making money because there's no secondary market for these songs, which is the case for 99% of them today, it really comes down to like, are you able to meet new people by collecting, and are you able to build a social identity around the fact that you collect on chain, and what can those experiences unlock for you?
Definitely. And I think that's why some of these artists who are the virtual artists based on like a PFP community are really successful, because it's that community that's built around it that makes it so interesting to collect on top of the music itself that might be really good.
It's funny because success is such a funny word to use with relation to on-chain music. And I'll kind of say this in two different ways. If you look at music on-chain relative to the rest of like the global NFT market, whether it be PFP collections or generative art, etc., music NFTs are like this tiny, tiny like blip in the wider pan of things. Then I look at an artist like TK or West Coast with his Faceless EP, and they're doing 5-7 ETH on the first day that the project comes out. And if you look at that dollar amount, you're basically getting the same amount as you would from 5 to 10 million plays on Spotify. And it's interesting because success is such a weird word to quantify here, because the reality is there's not a lot of people using the space, you know? Artists are making a lot more money per fan on chain than they are on Spotify, but these artists aren't like breaking or like becoming superstars or like doing anything crazy on chain yet, because they're just not a large demographic. But there's so many different variables that it's like, I struggle with that word success, because I agree in the reference that you're making, you know, artists like Angel Baby or West Coast, or these ones that have more PFP based relationships, they're the most quote unquote successful in on-chain music. But I feel like it's very difficult to even say that anything is successful in on-chain music yet, because we're so early and have had such like a little impact globally within like even just the crypto market, that there's still just so much room to grow for us to even consider something successful, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting to think about, because being successful back in the beginning of sound is very different than, or not successful as we just said, but being, or I guess making a lot of ETH is very different today than what it was back then. And I think that the space is going to continue changing like that. Like how many mints do you get may be the new way to go, or maybe it will be more how many like high priced mints can you do, versus just doing as many open editions as you can. So I think I'm really interested to see which way that goes. Like if it's going to stay like at these low price points, or if there will be those like premium NFTs, I guess you could say.
I mean, I'm hopeful that there will be premium ones. I think just to kind of give context to people who are listening, when Sound started, most songs were 25 editions at 0.1 ETH. ETH was probably $200 to $300 a pop. So artists were making $4 or $5 grand, once a day on the back of just like doing a Twitter space and kind of like putting their music on chain. Nowadays, if you did all those same things and you tried to sell even one NFT at 0.1, you probably would not get a buyer, and so we're in a very different place where artists are really, really hustling to get, 100, 1,000 mints. And I think one of the positive signs of the growth of the market has been that we are seeing more quote unquote mints across the board. Those are happening at a lower price point. That means that there's more unique buyers that are collecting these things, but in aggregate, artists are making less per drop because the price points are so substantially lower. How do you think about what success looks like in this space? Like for you as a collector, as a curator, do you think success is more driven by how much ETH you've made? Do you think it's more driven by how many mints you have? Is it somewhere in between, or how do you think about that?
I just like to see when an artist like has a filled audience section, like if there's really enough people who are taking the time to even get one. If you get one at 0.001, it's still really special, I think, to just see your face in that audience section. And I think as getting those unique collectors is definitely an exciting part of the space for me now. While the flipping aspect is not there as much, it's just nice to see that there's other people that are really doing the same thing and that believe in the future of it and will be here for a while.
What is your expectation of the artists that you've collected the most from? So like, let's say an artist like Daniel or Roki or Bloody White, some of these people that you've invested like a substantial amount of your ETH into. What is your expectation that you have from them?
I think the first expectation is just that every time there's a new song, like I can add it to my library and listen to it. Because some of those, the ones that I spend a lot of money on, I really just like. That's the main reason that I do it now, because I want them to have the money to keep producing more music. And I think that's like an interesting way to look at it too, because if they have enough money to continue making the music, then maybe that is enough of a reward for me to know that they're able to keep doing the music that they love. So I think that's right now the main thing I'm looking for, but that could change in the future.
Yeah, the reason why I wanted to ask that question is that just to really highlight again, I think that most collectors that exist today have a very similar mindset. I don't think that was always the case, but I would say that for most people who are collecting today, they don't have an expectation of being able to sell this for a lot more in the future. They don't have an expectation of you needing to issue a dividend or a buyback, but they are willing to just like collect it to support you financially. And I think it's very interesting to highlight that because that hasn't really existed in music outside of things like Bandcamp. But I feel like now there's such a clear way to show your support for something that it's just a very interesting relationship to have with an artist that really didn't exist prior to like the invention of on-chain music.
Yeah, I think it's much more appealing than Bandcamp, for example, because you can see those people who are on it. You can sell the NFT. You can transfer the NFT to somewhere else and put in some like, I don't know, you can make like an on cyber world and like put it on the wall or something. There's just so many ways that you can use the NFT rather than just paying money to the artist. And so basically you're receiving something that can have a lot of potential use cases or value, but depending on how you want to use it too, which is pretty interesting to me.
Have you ever showed your collection to one of your college friends?
Yeah, I've actually like had someone like scroll through and like look at some of the artists' covers and whatever, the album covers and the songs, but it as of right now, it's not that appealing to. They didn't go like, oh, I want to go collect now.
Yeah.
But it was still cool to show them, like, I have this many sounds and these are all the artists that I've supported and I own all these different songs.
Have you had any of your friends become fans of artists that you've collected on chain just by virtue of you showing them their music, even outside of them collecting the music?
I've definitely showed some friends like some music and they've definitely said like, oh, this is cool. And I tell them it's only on this platform. You can't listen to it anywhere else. And at first they're like, that's a little weird, but if they like it enough, like they'll go back to the website and listen to it. So I think that's a cool thing to be able to do, to convince someone to come back and listen.
What do you think this next chapter of the market looks like? We're existing in this world where 80% of songs are on optimism. Most songs are being minted for $3 a pop. There's not a lot of people who are expecting to make money off of it. Like, give me your forecast on the next 6 to 12 months of on-chain music.
I have trouble seeing what the future will hold, because I think it depends on the market around it. Really, I see it as copying what happens with ETH, as a coin. Where's the price going to go? Right now it's pretty low, and who knows, maybe it'll run up to $5,000 and everyone will start trading for multiples of what they paid for. So I think right now I'm just trying to help people understand what on-chain music is, and just to be consistent about it for any outcome. I'm not trying to predict exactly what's going to happen.
I think you're very accurate that the success of on-chain music today is very correlated to the success of Ether and kind of crypto as a whole. I think that that's also the single biggest challenge with the space as a whole, is getting into a point where these markets are not correlated to the price of ETH. Because what really happens is that whenever you see a run up in the price of ETH, that's actually happening because there's an introduction of a new market segment that people are buying ETH to get into. So whether that be ICOs or DeFi or NFTs, what we've seen historically is that ETH ends up going up once there's a new meta that people are playing, and people are buying ETH to participate in this new ecosystem. And so I think the biggest question that I've been asking myself is, how do you get on-chain music to a place where it's actually impacting the desire for people to buy ETH and come on-chain in the first place, versus the opposite, which is to say that on-chain music will grow as ETH starts to grow, which in my opinion implies that people are chasing something else and a percentage of that will trickle down to on-chain music. It's kind of the question to me is, how do you actually make on-chain music this expansive sector that's bringing so many new people into it, that the price of ETH itself is rising because people want to play in this new world that we've kind of created around it?
Yeah, I think that would be awesome if that does happen. I think that it's just really hard to get the word out right now. Even on Twitter, I feel the engagement is so low. Our Invest in Music posts, not as many people are seeing it rather than when we first launched. And I don't know if that's a Twitter thing or if that's just people's interest in the space right now, but I've been following along and hoping that one day it'll bounce back.
I think it's somewhere in between. I mean, the reality is that there's always going to be new people who are getting new followers. It doesn't matter what kind of market condition it is. I think it's easy for us to say that our engagement is going down because crypto market's down, because on-chain music is down. I think that that's an obvious way to kind of justify that action. I think the reality is that we're still looking for sort of that through line that gets to new people, that gets people excited about it. And I think there's a lot to unpack there. You mentioned more artists coming on chain and more good music coming on chain. But speaking from personal experience, just because you put good music on chain, it actually doesn't move the needle significantly. And I think that other people in the space would have different opinions, but just because I put a really good record on Sound doesn't mean that more people are going to come to Sound to collect it. I think that it really does require what you were saying earlier, artists coming on chain that are giving it a meaningful time and effort, where it actually doesn't matter that the music is on chain. I think that that's an assumption. What matters more is that not only is the music on chain, but that this artist is actually giving that pocket a significant amount of time and effort, which makes fans want to come in and spend time there. Because in the absence of that, it's just another platform that it's on alongside everywhere else. And I don't think that we're going to see any meaningful change or difference until there is an open acknowledgement that not only do artists want to have their music on chain, but they themselves want to spend their time in these on-chain communities.
Yeah, what I think would be awesome is if an artist is playing a festival and they put up collect this NFT, and maybe they put up a QR code or something like that, and just onboard those people right then and there. I think that in those types of environments, that's an easy way to bring awareness to on-chain music, because it's hard for people to just come across sound.xyz, for example. I had to search for it by looking for music NFT specifically. So I think just getting it out there, and especially those big artists who have the platform to share it if they're not scared. I think that could be a great way to really get new people in.
I agree with your sentiment there. The funny part is the reality of actually scanning a QR code at a concert and collecting anything on chain is terrible. It's like you either get a link to sign up for a wallet using Magic, or you get like a connect MetaMask button. Like the experience between like, here is a QR code and here is something in your wallet is so bad right now that I feel like it's going to take at least like another year or two for that to be at a place where like, A, people want to scan it, and then B, if they do actually scan it, that they can collect it without there being like a 95% drop off rate, which in my experience, you know, I love everyone that's trying this, but anytime I've ever seen a QR code at a live show that leads to you collecting something, it's just a terrible experience.
Interesting. Yeah.
I think for me, like kind of piggybacking on the back of that, I agree that doing things where you're meeting people where they are might be helpful in getting them over the edge. I think that I've been thinking a lot about like emergent new behaviors, which is to say like, why would you collect music to enjoy something that's new and differentiated from the music experience that you currently have, right? So to give an example of this, instead of putting up a QR code to collect something at a concert that you're at, what if you collecting on chain got you access into a virtual world that had an artist performing at that, right? The immediate reaction would be, virtual worlds suck. I don't want to go to a concert that's online. This music's probably whack. I don't want to have a wallet, etc. But I think it starts to change the nature of why you're collecting, because that collection actually gives you something that brings you like a social opportunity. Like when you're collecting something at an IRL show, it doesn't necessarily unlock anything for you. Like maybe you'll get access to like a community chat, or maybe you'll get access to like a website or something, but I don't think that there's anything sticky enough that keeps people around after they do that action. I feel like collecting needs to mean something more valuable to you. And I think that these experiences need to be really grounded in the fact that they are made possible by the fact that you own this song or that you own this asset on chain, versus right now where it feels like most people are just trying to figure out how to get anything into people's wallets, but there's not actually any recognition that this thing means something to you after you've actually collected it.
I think one of the like interesting experiences that I had collecting was back when Criteria launched from Daniel and Rio, and they had the whole virtual world thing. And I remember I'd walk around and I could like see actual NFTs on the hallway, and like I would click into it and I could see like it was owned by you, and like I could listen to the song and go to the page to collect it if I wanted to. And it all like ended with like a giant like minting button like in the center, like, and you didn't need to mint to access it. You could just come in and you don't need to buy anything. You can just have the experience and leave if you didn't want to collect.
Yeah.
So I think those types of experiences are very fun, like if we can get people to enter them.
It feels like we're trying to force all of this onto people in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? I think the biggest thing I've been trying to challenge myself on is like, let's not force people to have to do something in a place where they don't want to do it in the first place. Let's create pockets and opportunities where people can come and discover new music, new artists, and new opportunities if they so choose to do so. And I think what that looks like in practice is like not trying to send a mass blast out to your fan base via email or on Instagram saying to join like this community. It's probably just like setting up the community in the first place and trying to make that community as valuable as possible, that people are actually pulled into it. And I guess like even using some of my own personal experience here, like when we set up FWB Discord, you know, it was like the concept was you held these tokens and then you got into this Discord server. First day of that Discord server, there was no one there. So what we did is we went out and we started to give tokens to people who would make being in that chat exciting and valuable. And once there was actually people inside of it that people wanted to spend their time with, it just started to become natural, where more people were hitting me up asking to be in the chat, more people were applying to be in it, more people were going and buying tokens. And I guess the analogy that I would use here for Onchain Music is that until there is a time and a place where these communities have people in them that people want to spend their time with, nothing's going to work, because there's not actually a reason to be there in the first place. Like we need to find conversations or communities or pockets that people of actual, you know, substance are spending their time in, because that's the only thing that's going to keep people around. And until we do that, it's basically pretty much all for nothing until we can figure out how to crack that code.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I feel like I've been spending my time with a lot of the same collectors recently, and I haven't really felt like there were any like new people really like that were really interested as much as I am. And I definitely hope that we can find that way.
I hope so too. And it's interesting to highlight that this is very much how it felt in like 2018, 2019, bottom of the last bear market. Like it felt like you were seeing a lot of the same people. But what I will say is that there is like this silver lining, which is to say that there may be a lot of the same people, but I think you're starting to see like who's very serious about this, you know? Like you're starting to see who are the artists or the curators or the founders or the builders that are really committed to the ongoing success of this versus who are the people that are not really invested in it and they just kind of want to come in for a quick flip. Those people are always going to be seasonal. But I think what's been interesting to me is that although the circle is a lot smaller, you can sort of start to place your bets more accurately because you're starting to see like who's really committed to making this happen. And in a lot of ways, it requires a delusional mindset. But I think there is just enough of a silver lining between a very, very small pocket of people to know that if this space does actually work out, the chances are extremely high that it probably is a select few individuals that are still around and listening to episodes like this today that are actually going to make this thing valuable in the next cycle to come.
That's one of the things that I'm excited about with Family Affair, for example, like just consistently just bringing people on and dropping music and hoping that if we're consistent, like people will follow along and it can grow to something much bigger when more people do come.
Yeah. And so who do you look to when you're getting your information from Onchain Music? Like help just give some insights for people listening to this. Like when you're going and you're looking for new songs to put in the newsletter, you're looking for new stories to follow, like who are some of your go-to accounts to get information from?
I mean, definitely Ziggy Music is a great curator. They have a playlist that's really great, a lot of tweets that go out. A lot of the artists, like I've just been following directly, and I definitely check the sound recent drops page. That's always really helpful. Right now there's not that many drops going on, so you can pretty much explore all of them on your own, just listening around. They just added genre filtering, so you can find the type of music that you're interested in. But overall, like I'm just on Twitter looking. There are some chats that people will talk about, like what trades they're making and what songs they're collecting. I'm definitely looking there, but of course follow us, Invest in Music, because we'll be curating the best music there is.
I did not pay him to say that. What are the chats that you feel like you're getting the most information out of on a day-to-day basis? Like when you go on Telegram and you think about these collector chats that exist today, like where are you spending the most time?
I am spending the most time reading like Loners and The Green Room. Those are two bigger chats that I've been following a lot recently. I obviously keep up with the Invest in Music chat because we're always posting our polls, we're posting pre-sales, things like that. And a lot of the artist chats, like I just go in occasionally and just see like what people are talking about, and it's nothing specific, just in general, like tapping into those every so often. I keep some of them on mute and just go in at the end of the week, see what's going on, and I feel like I'm a little bit more knowledgeable about the space.
And then in closing thoughts here, some recommendations for people who are following along with Onchain Music. I would love for you to give some of your favorite artists that people have probably heard of before, and then kind of complement that with some small artists that people might have not heard of that they should check out following this episode.
You mean like big Web 2 artists that are in, or just the big Web 3 ones?
Web 3 ones.
So, I mean, definitely Roki, Daniel Allen, Rio Cragen, all those types of artists. I'm definitely following a lot of smaller artists like Bear and Friends, who I'm working with.
Some artists, I'll kind of fill in the gaps there a little bit. Some artists that I've been really liking a lot, that have been doing very well recently. Sarah Phillips, I feel like, has been doing phenomenally. She's like been so consistent and active in the community. We obviously had West Coast on last week, which I really like a lot. Love Annika Wells and what she's doing. There's so many different artists that I feel like are just newer to the space that I think are just getting started here. I'd give a shout out to people like Kudos, some of the smaller artists that are just like putting their music on chain. What I really look for is like those songs that don't get a lot of attention, but it's just genuinely great music. Shout out to an artist named Veggie, who I know has been dropping a good amount. Plugo's been putting his music on chain. Trying to think of some more people outside of like the electronic world, but it's really interesting to find songs that are just like genuinely great songs that like kind of bubble to the top, even if they don't have like a bunch of mints on them. Because that kind of feels like something that I'm really curious about, is those artists that are consistently minting, even in the absence of them making a ton of money, because they're really choosing to commit to like, the future of this space as a whole.
Yeah, I'm really excited about all the big artists. I always collect the big artists, and I'm also, exploring those newer artists coming in and collecting pretty much anyone who I just like the music. So I'm always watching.
I like it. And I guess one last question I have for you to your professors and your members of your university that may be listening to this episode. What do you hope to get out of your time here in LA and from this internship in particular?
I'm just really excited to hopefully make a mark on Onchain music, help get more people informed on what is coming out, because there's a lot of great music that's like under the radar right now, and just to get some more eyes on that is really all that I hope to get out of this whole thing.
Yeah. I guess one closing question I have for you is what do your parents think of you spending so much time in Onchain music?
They're not so happy about the monetary aspect of it, but they're glad that at least I found a place with people that I enjoy hanging out with, and at least I got a job out of it too. Yeah.
I mean, the reason why I want to highlight that is that your experience reminds me a lot of my own coming out of college. I basically just dove headfirst into crypto, had no clue what I was doing, knew I was passionate about this space, but I had no idea what I was going to make on the back of it. And when I was trying to explain to my parents that I was going to Singapore for a crypto conference, they literally thought I was crazy, But I think there was just kind of this trust and this confidence that you're going to figure it out. And I found one thing from being in crypto for about 5 years. It's that if you can find a way to just survive and just stay active and pay attention to what's going on, there's always going to be something else to catch. And I don't know if that's going to be a year from now, 5 years from now, whatever. But I feel like one thing I'd really applaud you on is you've just been very consistent. And from that first moment that, you had that meeting with Daniel and David, and Daniel showed me on FaceTime, it's been an active, continuous effort from the start. And I think a large reason why I'm happy to have you on this podcast and why you've been able to contribute to Invest in Music is that it's very clear to me that you care about this. And, beyond like there being any financial element, I think that there's just a true belief in this space and in these artists that we're working with. And so I just want to say thank you for your hard work. It definitely doesn't go unnoticed, and I'm excited to see where you go from here.
Yeah, thanks. I'm 100% excited to keep exploring and definitely just showing up every day, and hopefully it works out.
I love it. Well, in closing thoughts, if you want to shill your music, this is your guy, Michael DiVestea. Go ahead and plug your Twitter, bro. What is it?
Yeah, DiVestea Mike, DiVesteamike. You can find my username on pretty much everything, Twitter, Sound, whatever. Check it out.
There you go. And shout out to Syracuse University for letting this guy come out here and spend some time with us. We're going to take great care of him, and he's going to be one of Onchain's music's finest collectors of all time. So thank you guys for listening. It's been an awesome episode, Michael. Glad to have you, and we will see you guys again next week.
Bye.